Hey guys, welcome back to the Chessyard. This is Dhere Bagga, and today I'll be showing you the 4 knights game as I played with black. Now, it's easier to control from the white side because you are the one who is making the first move. But if you are playing as black, the 4 knights game is always disadvantageous to you. So I'll show you how to control that and make it into an advantage. So yeah, let's start off with the game. White starts off with e4. I responded back with e5. Both are trying to take initial control of the center. He develops his knight on f3 with the idea of threatening the pawn on e5. I try to defend it by moving knight on c6. He develops his knight on c3. I also develop my knight on f6. Now the game has already been set up as a 4 knights game because all the 4 knights involved in the game of chess have been developed here. And then he brings his bishop to b5, trying to pin the knight if I move pawn d6 next. But here, I also decided to do the same to him by moving b4. And here, the game has transposed into double Spanish variation because both the bishops are now eyeing the king actually. So yeah, these kind of games generally have a solid middle game because these are identical situations here. If you divide the board into two halves, it's a symmetrical board setup for now. And generally, we'll see castling on both the sides happening immediately after this. So, a pretty symmetrical structure that happens. And that's why, because white has the next move with him, he controls the game. And that's why even the engine says that he's just point two ahead for the time being. But here he tried to spoil the pawn structure for black by capturing the knight on c6, and I captured back with my b7 pawn here. Now I could have captured with d7 pawn here actually, but the idea here was I can develop my bishop on b7 and always eye towards the long diagonal on the king side, threatening this g2 pawn always. Maybe this g file can be opened later on. The rook can come on the g file and attack this pawn, which can be vulnerable in the future after the king castles. Also, one more advantage of this was that if he doesn't capture the pawn here, suppose in the next move, I can then push my d6 pawn and then strengthen the center as well. But here he went for the capturing the e5 pawn. Of course, he's getting a pawn for free, so why not capture it? I captured back the knight first on c3, which he takes back with his pawn from d2 to d3, and I castle on the king side first. And then he also castles. Now both the sides have castled. Now both will try to take advantage by moving their rooks on the e file, try to develop bishops, and then get the other rook into the picture as well. So I captured back the pawn first, which was lying without any support on the e4 square, and then he tries to threaten my knight by moving his queen to f3. So now I offered him my knight on g5 because if he captures with the bishop, I can take back with the queen. My queen also gets developed in the process. If I would have got my knight back on the f6 square, then he would have probably pinned it with the bishop, and my queen would have been left just babysitting this knight here. So no point of getting the knight to f3 f6. So I developed it. I took it back to the g5 square rather. Now he's trying to apply double attacks on the g5 knight here by moving queen to g3. So I got my knight back to e6 here. The game is pretty much still stable. Either ways it can go from here on. He develops his pawn. He starts moving his queen side pawns here. Moved his pawn to b4, and I developed my bishop on b7. The main idea of capturing the bishop here in the initial move when I opened this b file was to eye the long diagonal, and that's what I'm now going ahead with. As you can see, it's a draw situation for now if both the sides play equal. Very good from here. The best move continuations from possible from here. Now he moves pawn c4, and I tried to kick away this knight from here by moving pawn d6. He goes back to the d3 square, and I move f6 with the idea that I knew that his bishop will probably be coming on the b2 square next, and then always threaten this g7 pawn because his queen is also eyeing here already. So he first pushed his pawn further ahead to c5, and I crossed it by moving d5. Uh, I could have gone for the capture, but capture didn't seem a good way from here to be proceeded because there's no advantage of capturing. Plus, I'm letting his other pawn also come here, then he can bring his a pawn further ahead. So I tried to control it. He gets his rook on the empty e file by moving rook to e1, and so did I, trying to equalize the situation here. Now he gets his bishop on h6. Of course, I cannot capture it here because it's an invalid move because queen is eyeing the uh, g8, which is the king here. So I cannot capture the bishop here. So I try to develop the queen as well as protect this g7 square by moving my queen to d7 here. Now he tries to offer the bishop for exchange here by moving it to f4 with the idea that his knight can hop in on the f4 square later on if I capture. But I did the other way around. I moved to d4, offering him the rook so that he captures, and eventually my second rook also comes in the open file, which he goes for the capture. I capture back with the a8 to e8. Now I control the e file, and if he gets his rook here, I can actually can capture it, and he takes back with the knight. So he didn't here. He didn't want to go for the other exchange as well. He moved here pawn c3, which was a blunder because now his queen and king will be forked by the knight, and that's what happened. He moved his king, of course, that because it was a check here to continue the game further. I captured the queen, which he takes back with the pawns. And now the h file is also open from him, but yeah, it doesn't matter anymore because now black will be just attacking from the center. So I moved bishop to a6 here with the idea of capturing the knight probably in the next move. So yeah, I have to just go for exchange because I'm up by a lot of strength. I have the queen here. So I went for the exchange. He takes back with the rook. Develop my queen to f5 here with the idea if he moves his rook here, I can give him a check from b1 here. But he moved his rook to the d1 here. So I went to c2. Now the idea is when these kind of end games have started, just go for capturing the pawns, other pawns as well, exchange the rooks whenever possible, and then crush the opponent from here because it's just a matter of formality once you are a queen up. But yes, you have to be still careful. Don't leave your last rank empty, so that if I'm just having this f pawn on f7 here, the king can be vulnerable throughout the game if it takes only one bad move to actually turn around the games. So yeah, be attentive in the end games as well. So I captured the a2 pawn here. He captures the pawn on c7 with his bishop, and here I give him a check by moving queen to e2. He moves to g1. I start moving my a6 pawn here. He goes back to the f4 with his bishop, and I just got my rook on the a file. Now I'll be pushing this pawn further as much as it is possible for me. He tries to block the queen's path of going back to the e file, any of the squares here. Also, there is no very good square here for queen. Actually, I cannot capture on the rook even if I get it to the b2. The pawns are pretty much solid here because the rook is protecting it. So yeah, the only idea was to push the pawns further. I moved a5. He tries to stop it with his rook on a1. So I just keep proceeding with my pawn with the idea that later on I can capture the rook with my queen and get the other queen as well. He starts moving his king towards h2. I push my pawn forward to a3. Now he started pushing his pawn on g4, but that does nothing to bother me. I kept moving my a2 pawn. He pushes it one step further, and I went to b2 here with the idea that I will capture a rook here if you don't move it here. So he takes the pawn. I capture back with the knight. Now both are aligned as well on the second rank. But yeah, there's a defender here, which is the bishop. So I cannot go for the attack straight away. He captures the pawn on f6, which I take back with my pawn on from g7 to f6, and he starts moving his king. So I cap start continue gobbling the pawns here. He moved his king further. I take the pawn on b4, give him a check. Now he keeps moving towards the king side here. But yeah, there's no threat here, but only threat is of him getting a checkmate as soon as possible. Where I actually went with moving my pawn further, making his bishop move, which he gets now to h6. So I capture on the pawn on f2 here, giving a check from that file as well. Now he moves his king to e6. I take back the pawn on c5, and then he moves pawn g4. I respond with queen to e5 check. He has to move it down to d7 here. I get my rook on the a2 file. He tries to give away his bishop as well here, which I didn't bother taking because the whole idea was to checkmate him as soon as possible. So I moved rook to a7 first, giving him a check. He goes to the last rank. I give him a check by moving to e7. And now here was a mate in one, which I actually missed somehow. I don't know why. Maybe I was thinking of the bishop, or maybe I was just trying to mate from the seventh rank itself. So I pushed him one step further ahead. He moves, and then it's a mate. So yeah, a good four knights game played well by the black. Even if you remove the blunder which he gave away his queen by forking it, I think the game was pretty much in control from there as well. So yeah, just check that out once as well. Yeah, here also, if we see one move behind, the game was 1.5 in favor of black here. So obviously, this pawn was hanging. Then probably bishop can come into the picture anytime. The rook can also go to the e2 file. So even if you wouldn't have blundered this move, we could still have won the game from here. So it was in control for black throughout. So yeah, that's how you can play against the four knights opening if you are playing as blank. I hope this video helps you learn something new. And once you learn it, please do experiment, because again, watching the videos will not help you grow your game to a next level. You have to know the lines. For that, you have to watch the videos, but then you have to test them out by playing it on the board or online. So yeah, I hope you liked it. Please do share your comments and feedback. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye.